Hey there, my name's Niandra, and in December I was given the chance to do a Blizzard-sponsored Mercy guide. My original pitch to them was one that focused entirely on damage boost because I've always loved talking about that part of Mercy's kit. They wanted something more general, but I had a lot of notes written down, so I thought I'd make use of them. Let's start with how damage boost works. For your teammate to get the boost, you need to be blue beaming them as they fire the damage, not as it hits, and for the most part this doesn't affect much. It mainly comes into play in regards to throwables like Fire Strike or Dynamite. With objects like Rein's Fire Strike, the main thing is to avoid wasting beam up time in hopes of getting it. For example, if we're attacking a choke and Rein's got his shields up with Ashe behind him, it's slightly better that I just stick on her, especially if I can see a lot of damage being blocked. With Fire Strike in particular, be aware of if your Reinhardt has ult ready, because they usually use Fire Strike to build it and are less inclined to use it when Earth Shatter is ready. What you can also do is track the cooldown in your head and watch for your teammates approaching corners, since that can be a good indication that they're going to use their throwables. With attacks that are an animation in the damage, such as Zenyatta's volley or Rein's charge, your beam needs to be attached when they do the damage. This means if I'm pocketing someone else and I see Zen charge it up or Rein charge past me, I love to quickly flick my beam onto them and then go back to whatever I was doing. This also means you can sort of multitask by damage boosting your ally as they shoot and then do something else while they reload. That being said, don't feel bad if you can't consistently do this because Overwatch has a lot of visual clutter, so it can be hard to keep track. The main thing is to just make sure you're not blue beaming allies that can't currently do damage. Primary weapons, beams, and melee abilities can all be boosted. As for objects, some like Tracer's Pulse Bomb can be, while others like Torp's Turret can't. Here's the full list, but you don't have to memorize it if you're aware of this piece of logic from Chinchiro. If an object hurts to be thrown at you, generally it can be damage boosted, which is why you can boost Junkrat's concussion mines, but not his steel trap. Damage boost also increases lifesteal, which at the time of recording is literally one character, it's just Reaper. Lifesteal meaning that a portion of their damage done is automatically converted into health. You would think this is also the case with Moira, but she actually has set health she gains back, so increasing her damage does not affect it. Regardless, if you spot these characters in combat missing only a small bit of HP, it can be worth damage boosting them while they self-heal themselves. Damage boost does currently stack with no cap. This means you can combo damage boost with Orisa Supercharger and/or Ana's Nano Boost for highly effective results. Just keep in mind ult economy, because generally using 2 or more ults in one fight is considered excessive and likely leaves the team with very little in the next fight. Last of all, there used to be this thing where Mercy would not get ult charge if she blue beamed attacks that would already kill without being damage boosted. At the time of recording, this is no longer the case. You do get ult charge from it, so don't be discouraged from pocketing your snipers. Moving on, the default state technique. If you're a long-term viewer of mine, you will have heard this piece of advice numerous times, but I have to mention it here. The default state technique is something more for PC players, where for parts of the match, say during fights, you hold down damage boost to make it your default beam state, then tap healing when needed, while you continue to hold down damage boost. This technique is amazing for 2 reasons. For starters, it allows you to easily avoid instances where you continue healing someone after they're full, because lifting the finger off left mouse button automatically takes you back to the blue beam, even if it's only for like half a second before your target needs healing again. This then really pushes the uptime of your staff. It's also great for getting in tiny flicks of damage boost while healing an injured target, and allows you to time your beam states with what they're doing pretty easily. The only real issue with this technique is that it can be pretty physically taxing on your hands, so do be wary of doing it for long periods of time. Anyway, let's move on to general damage boost tips. So I've done Mercy VOD reviews for about 3 years now. There's 2 things I constantly saw in the beginning and I still see now. The first is people who heal their allies to full and then continue healing, while the second is people who are afraid to be aggressive with the blue beam. They feel like everyone needs to be full to use damage boost, which will rarely be the case, so they just don't use it. My first tip is to get comfortable with hastily flicking between beam modes like this, which the default state technique can help with. I talked about this in a recent VOD review where when you heal an ally that's full health, you are essentially not doing anything, so you won't be generating ult charge. This means your stats will be lower and you'll be getting Valkyrie slower than a Mercy that did push damage boost. At the very least, please get into the habit of damage boosting allies that are anti-naded, or flick your heal beam onto someone else in the meantime. Generally what I do is try to track the cooldown in my head so I can switch back to healing just as it's about to end. Having the confidence to damage boost injured allies over healing them is also an essential skill to learn, and in my opinion, one of the main things that separates a good Mercy from a great one. It's also really valuable for low to mid rank Mercies that feel they can never push damage boost because their team is always taking damage. Generally what this means is watching the person you're beaming and trying to gauge how much pressure they're under. The easiest and safest rule to follow is the more your team is already winning a fight, the more you can push damage boost on injured allies. For example, in this clip from OpenQ, we've got at least 2 picks, Winston's damage is AoE, and he has his bubble, which means I'm confident in damage boosting him despite the low health. When I do this, I get to heal my target after the kill is confirmed, meaning I've got an ult charge from both beam modes. I also love pushing damage boost on injured allies when they're in a 1v1 already in their favour. Another common example is when the enemy team is trying to stall and they're funneling out a spawn. Lowering the time to kill in these instances can be the difference between your team capping and the enemy burning the clock down further. Being able to damage boost may often rely on your position as well. On payload attack, unless I absolutely need to, I really try to avoid being the person that's on cart because Mercy's value is infinitely higher if she pushes up with a DPS. At the beginning of defense, you should also be looking out for allies that seem interested in throwing damage towards the enemy spawn doors. Because your teammates output more damage while blue beamed, they also get more ult charge, which can be a great indicator of who to boost, especially when struggling to pick a target. Mercy is a character that can and should frequently check the scoreboard to gather various information, one of them being the current ult charge of her teammates. If you have 2 characters with synergy and one of them is behind an ult charge, giving them extra attention can bring them back into sync. If Genji has ult ready while Anna's hanging around to say 90%, I'll briefly pocket her and try and let her have the healing. The extra ult charge is also important to keep in mind when your allies switch heroes because their charge gets reset. It can often be worth giving these teammates high priority to catch them up with everyone else. You most likely know that Mercy's beam retains connection for 1.4 seconds when you break line of sight or either person leaves the maximum range. Obviously, this is great for positioning, but it's also fantastic for damage boosting your flankers or very highly mobile allies. For example, if you've got a wrecking ball and he's heading towards enemies at the choke, try to flick your beam onto him as he rolls past you if possible. At the start of attack, I like to begin by damage boosting the ally that I think is going to do damage first, which will sometimes be characters like Tracer and Genji. The lingering beam on them as they speed out of range has the potential to give them a nice burstier start, so definitely take advantage of this. Especially if you're running Mercy with DPS you usually can't hard pocket. A very niche example, but this also works with allies that go through Symmetra's teleporter if you want to give them support without going through it yourself. Keeping a close eye on your second support is highly recommended in general. Not only does it allow you to peel for them when needed, but also push damage boost further. If I have an ally that's injured and I can see my other support healing them, I'll ask myself, do they need us both, or can I use it as an opportunity to damage boost someone else? With the answer depending on how much pressure the enemy is applying on us. If you look out for it, it's pretty easy to see if an ally is being healed by someone else, since most supports have a pretty distinct visual cue. When I've got Valkyrie ready and the other healer is still building ult, if I notice allies missing small bits of health, I'll try to let them deal with it and try to focus more on damage boost. If you're nervous, what you could do is damage boost that injured target so you can quickly start healing them if they suddenly need you both. If your team has clearly lost the fight and there's only you and say one other ally left alive, it can often be worth damage boosting them instead of healing so they die quicker with potentially higher ult charge. This is especially useful to keep in mind if you're running Roadhog because he can feed like a motherfucker if you allow him. Let's say everyone else is dead but you two. He vapes, you heal him and keep him alive long enough for him to vape again. And then he dies. The rest of your team is going to have respawned at this point and they're going to have to wait for you to at spawn, probably with how to quit smoking pamphlets in their hands. I have definitely flicked damage boost onto allies that I know I won't be able to keep alive. Moving on, what do you do if allies aren't hitting shots? First, remember what we touched upon earlier. As Mercy, you often don't want to be looking at the person you're beaming, instead you want to be aware of what's happening around you. That being said, you also need to listen out or occasionally look at your beam target to make sure they're in a position where they can actually do damage. I remember once thinking, oh my god, how is my Orisa not hitting anything? And it turned out she was going through her 2.55 second reload animation. Besides that, your allies might be focusing shields. Mercy doesn't receive hit markers or ult charge for damage boosting allies that are damaging barriers, meaning it can feel very underwhelming despite being incredibly valuable to the team. Since Mercy doesn't provide much shield break herself and your second support might be the same way, it can be really important to make up for this with the blue beam. Alternatively, you could look to boost allies maybe like a Hanzo who are trying to take shots from off angles. At mid to low ranks, it can be worth focusing damage boost more on allies that are less aim intensive or ones that can throw out spam damage, like a Reinhardt when he's brawling or a Junkrat firing into a corridor. Alternatively, focusing your blue beam more on allies with high impact ultimates so they get them faster could be the way to go, to try and win the fight via Graviton Surge for example if your team is struggling to get kills. Ultimately though, Mercy is team dependent, so if you aren't getting much value from damage boost and you feel you could survive without her mobility, switching heroes is definitely an option. To wrap this video up, I want to throw out some rapid fire hero specific tips that I don't feel I covered elsewhere, so let's start with DPS. In general, Soldier is a fantastic damage boost target that's often worth hard pocketing. Watch out for him using his biotic field because if he's only missing a tiny bit of health or not under pressure, it's often worth damage boosting him while he heals himself. Echo in general is a very strong target to hard pocket. Try to damage boost her while duplication is active, especially when she copies heroes with slower charging ults like Sigma and Zarya. The latter is especially important because while Echo gets ult faster, she still begins with 0 shield charge, meaning her DPS is quite low. Ashe was recently given a nerf where she can no longer one-shot a fully health squishy with damage boost. Despite this, she is still a top tier blue beam target. Damage boosting Bob is also great. I pretty much never heal him because I always assume he'll be focused hard enough that I can't out heal it, so I'd rather capitalize on boosting his auto aim. Bastion is also an amazing character to pocket, especially since he's usually ran with teams that build around him. Just remember, he's an incredibly high priority for the enemy team, so always try to pocket him from a moderate distance and constantly have escape routes in mind in case he dies. With Symmetra, one thing to keep in mind is that she gains no ult charge while her ult is active and her wall can remain for up to 15 seconds. This means you can either use your blue beam to let her play very aggressively or use it as an opportunity to build someone else's ult. Tracer is honestly a surprisingly strong damage boost target, so I mainly look out for her when my team is playing capture points like King of the Hill or 2CP objectives. When the team is very compact, I can usually get my beam on her when she briefly goes past me without putting myself in danger. Damage boosting Widowmaker means her shots need to be less charged, so try to get your beam attached onto her if you see her grapple into the air. Even though she can one-shot without damage boost and doesn't have the best ult, I still think she's a really good target. The main thing to keep in mind is to be careful about giving away her position with your beam if she's playing in the back. I consider Mei one of the less desirable damage boost targets. This is because her spray into an icicle headshot combo kills a squishy without it, and the blue beam doesn't make her freeze any faster. If she's focusing tanks, then I may be more inclined. There was also a change where you can't target a main ice block with your staff. In that case, during Valkyrie, be careful about making her your main beam target because you don't want your mass damage boost to suddenly get cut off. Mei also doesn't generate ult charge while her ult is active and there's a delay between her shots, so I would probably boost someone else during Blizzard. Moving on, tank specific tips. Because while Mercy is primarily used to pocket DPS, the tanks could be just as good. Reinhardt was recently given a buff to his swing damage, so if you see him playing aggressive, try to damage boost him because it's so good. Since Rein is often paired with Zarya, he'll usually be around when she grabs, which is a fantastic time to blue beam him. With D.Va, try to damage boost her as much as possible when she's out of mech so she gets it back faster. Also keep in mind she has very high damage drop off, so avoid boosting her if she's trying to snipe, but do blue beam her in close combat, especially if you haven't seen her micro missiles yet. With Roadhog, listen out for sound or other indicators that he's hooked someone and try to flick damage boost onto him, especially if the target has above 200 HP. If I'm healing him when this happens, I usually flick to the blue beam and then flick back. I really love damage boosting Winston in general. His Tesla cannon isn't super high damage, but it can hit multiple people, which makes it especially strong against single target healers like Enemy Mercy. Winston's leap damage can also be boosted, so try to beam him when he jumps to initiate since he relies on that initial burst damage quite a bit. And last of all, support specific tips. The main thing to keep in mind here is that it means both supports are focused on the same area, which may leave others without healing, but that doesn't mean you should never damage boost your other support. If you're running Mercy with an off healer, good luck, and also try to damage boost hard during defensive ults since you likely don't need the healing. With Anna, her character model has a slight hunch when zoomed in. This, along with the trail of scope shot, makes it really easy to see if she's doing damage, especially if she's positioned near allies. Sometimes it is worth flicking your beam onto her, especially against characters like Pharah or Echo. I also try to damage boost her after she sleeps somewhere near her. And that is all from me for this video. I honestly cannot believe this one got so long. Please consider joining my Discord if you enjoyed it. We're full of kind Mercy mains looking, happy to give advice. Don't even care if I fuck the take up. We're leaving it in. I want to go to bed. Thanks for watching. Have a nice day.